I know that lay Christians are just completely lazy and will just accept whatever some apologist says is true that fits the narrative that they desire to believe. And this is very evident in Mr. Walker here's information that he is utilizing to try to say that this validates the eclipse during the time frame of the crucifixion, as well as validates Jesus. Now, one of the things that most apologists realize, and that many of the lay scholars who want to be above just reading the Bible, they realize that you have to have corroborating information from outside sources in order to prove Jesus. That the Bible in itself cannot be the only thing that you're utilizing in order to prove to Jesus. And so they look for outside information. And oftentimes that outside information comes from cultures that are far and far, far, far away from the Levant, which they then try to claim that they are referencing Jesus. But yet they fail to comprehend the information to which they are reading. So Walker here is, Jericho Walker is saying that Chinese history on the day of the Messiah's death. The first problem is that nobody actually knows the exact day. There are different scholars and different people who have given different days. For instance, Origin says that the day had to be March 25th, that the insemination of pregnancy in Mary and his death had to happen on the same day, and which is why you got 9 months later you got December 25th. So Origin is saying that they had to happen on the same day because that's how these celestial things happen. That was later picked up by one of the popes, who said that 25th of December is the day of his birth. But mainly sticking here with the crucifixion, some scholars say that the crucifixion happened in 31. Some say that it happened in 26 CE. And they're trying to make that fit because of the differences between Matthew and Luke as far as when Jesus would have been born, which either would have been in somewhere between 6 BCE and 4 CE. So they're trying to fix dates in order to make it work because of the contradiction that is in Matthew and Luke. Now, he says that the eclipse on the day of, and I am horrible when it comes to pronouncing Mandarin names, but Gui Hai, the man from heaven dies. Sources say the latter Han annual number 18, Gui Ha, same day, and then he just put the darkness to darkness. So I spent the better part of a day researching that information, and even though I found information right off the bat that demonstrate that this is far-flung, I went even further and I found the manuscript itself, and it was written in the Mandarin of that era. And then I went and found a translation of it so that I can see what the translation is. Because back in the day, before we had these things accessible to us, I would have to trust in the translation of some person in China or some American or European or African or whoever is translating this information and hope that their translation is correct. And then you have to find 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other translations that match so that you can have some level of confidence that that is the correct translation. But thankfully, we don't have to go through those processes anymore. So I found those and I looked at the translation so that I can read the actual annual itself. And when you read it, you find that there was an emperor, Guanhang, something like that. I'm telling you, I messed that up. In and around 31 BCE, who referenced the Guanghai. He referenced Guanghai in the same way emperors in China has done it over and over and over and over again. And when you read the annual 18, what you the actual translating, because either you're accepting a poor translation and a poor understanding of Chinese culture and Chinese history. When you read the actual translation, what he actually says is that as the emperor himself, that he recognized that eclipse, comets, earthquakes, floods, any type of natural disaster or big sign in the sky that brings about evil because if the people suffering they are suffering, and that there's any kind of natural situation that is symbolic of the suffering, then it is the emperor's fault. The emperor Guanghai took it upon himself to say that he is the one who will shoulder the burden because it is his fault that his people are suffering through this flood. His people are suffering through the famine, suffering because of the earthquake. If there's an eclipse and there's some negative things going on, he would say that it is his fault that the people are suffering, and he, the emperor, is taking on the burden. And after Guang Hai did that, successive emperors did the exact same thing, and they, anytime an event happened, they would take on the sin, so to speak, of the people, of their people, and then say that it is their fault, and they take on that burden. And then each one of them will give their people an amnesty. An amnesty. The correct word that should have been translated is not salvation, but it's amnesty. And then here's the other part, my guy, that you need to understand, because obviously you didn't research this beyond what some apologists said. You didn't go into the Mandarin. You didn't translate it for yourself. You didn't do any of those things. The other aspect of it is this, and I need you to understand this is provable science. Based on your Bible, this darkness, this eclipse that you're speaking of, and I said this in another video, had to have occurred during the time frame of a new moon. An eclipse of the sun can never happen unless it's a new moon. A new moon means that you cannot see the moon, okay? The moon is not visible at night. That is the only time. At the time frame of a full moon, an eclipse is impossible for an eclipse to happen because of the position of the moon and the earth and the sun. Okay, so we understand that. Now, Jesus supposedly was crucified during the time frame of Passover. Passover always happened in and around the full moon. So it's impossible for an eclipse to happen. It doesn't work that way. There has never been a recorded eclipse that happened during a full moon. Never. Doesn't happen. Sorry. And I know some stupid people are going to say, well, that's the miracle of God that he made it happen even when it ain't supposed to happen. No. Impossible. Didn't happen. If the moon all of a sudden shifted to where it was in position to create an eclipse during the phase of a full moon, that means the moon would have to circumvent the earth really, really fast. That would have created tidal waves all over the planet. We would have records of those tidal waves during that time frame in the first century. We don't have any records of that. There would have been earthquakes. There would have been all kinds of disruptions within the earth if the moon just all of a sudden jumped around and created that during that time frame. And there are no records of that anywhere. And also, let me just add this last little tidbit. The people in China never heard of Jesus until 1,000 years. Actually, I think it's about 1,500 years after he supposedly lived. 1,500 years after he supposedly lived. They never heard of him until then. So, and even though there was a Silk Road and there was trade going on, they never heard of him. Never. So, I need you to go do more research before you try to make these types of statements. You should research things before you just believe these things. And that way you'll have more facts instead of belief. I know that you want to believe, and that is a big driver, but wanting to believe and looking at actual facts are two different things. And I know it's disturbing because it makes you feel like you question your faith. Maybe you shouldn't watch my page. Maybe you should just use the power of scroll and stay in love with your Jesus. Y'all have a great day. And remember always, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration.